I've never felt more free in my life, even though I'm broke as a joke. I have no friends, but I can live just as who I was meant to be, and we'll see where this goes. And that's kind of how it started.
How do you build a network, run a profitable business, and make an impact? Oh, and have a personal life at the same time? That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson, husband, father of 5, author of the book 5+1, president and co-founder of Master Networks, Inc., a national networking organization. Look, each week I bring you successful entrepreneurs who will share success strategies of how to effectively build a network, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. I'm so excited today with my special guest. She is a single mom with 2 grown children, and she is originally from Chicago, now lives in Arizona, and she's the founder and CEO of Strive for Change Health and Wellness. She is a recovery coach. You guys are going to love what she's going to talk about today, primarily focusing on helping women recover from those things that hold them back. So we're going to dive deep into that. Let me tell you about some of her accomplishments. This young lady that I have on this show today, she made $1 million in her first year with Isagenix, and she's been featured in Success from Home magazine. She's an industry leader in the network marketing world, but her biggest accomplishment she's most proud of, which I loved, is she was voted as the heart of Isagenix by her peers. Over 600,000 people voted her the heart of the organization, which we'll talk more about too. So welcome to Connect, Share, Prosper. Tracy O'Malley, my guest today. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I do have to make one correction.
What did
I did not make $1 million in my first year. It was my first 2 years.
And you know what? The team had it correct. I just got so excited. Well, if 1 year sounds better, you can just go with that. But no, I love it.
Yeah,
the fact that you did, yes, please. The fact that you did that even 2 years is just absolutely amazing. But can we jump back to the Heart Award and tell us about that?
Yeah.
What is that, and how did you get that?
So that award is at once a year they vote a new heart of the company. And the year that I won it was just a couple of years ago. When I think about me being voted that, on paper, rewind about a decade, I was least likely to win that. Being voted the heart was a contribution to service for the entire field, not just my organization, which is quite large, and just pouring into people, showing up at events and leading people, mainly people not even financially connected to me, and just helping us grow as a community, as a company, as a movement. And that was so special to me.
Yeah.
Because for so long I felt heartbroken and heart sick, and I had to do a lot of work to get to where I got emotionally to be able to even pour into anybody, let alone myself. So it was incredible. My favorite moment over the last 7 years for sure.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of work to get from where you were to where you are, and to get that award. You said you felt heartbroken and heart sick.
Yeah.
Why? And what was the thing that led you to change that?
It was kind of like a perfect storm. And when I say storm, it was like a freaking hurricane. My life was. And, looking back, it all happened exactly how it was supposed to. About 7 years ago around this time, I was in the car industry for 15 years, and that's pretty cutthroat. And, it's a rough industry, especially being a woman. The ratio is about 1,000 to 1. And I had to be tough as nails to survive that. And I didn't love what I did, but I was really good at it. I was in a relationship that wasn't the best for me. I had teenagers that were starting to, act out a little bit. And to top it all off, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and 12 days later he passed away. And and I had just turned 40 as well. And it was like this epiphany that life really is too short. And if I continue on this pace, it's not going to be a great life, not just for me, but what am I passing on to my kids? What am I showing them is possible? And, you know, we tell our kids you can be, do, and have anything, but I wasn't modeling that at all. And, you know, with losing my dad so quickly, it was like this 2x4 between my eyes, like, get your crap together.
Yeah.
And you need to unlearn a lot of stuff, because everything that I didn't want to become, I noticed I had become. And then I noticed my kids were starting to pick up that. And I knew that I had to break some things. And it's just like when you break a bone, when we talk about heartsick, but when we break a bone, if we just kind of ignore it and don't get it set properly, we can't use it the way it's supposed to, and it's going to have pains and all those things. And unfortunately, our heart is no different. And I knew that I had a ton of heartbreak that I just ignored, and it wasn't healed properly. So in order to really change the patterns and change how I showed up in the world and change my life and that for my kids, I was going to have to kind of go in and re-break some things and start from scratch. And that's what I did at 40 years old.
So kudos to you, number one, that you had the awareness that you wanted to change. And in fact, as you said, needed to change some things, that you weren't doing the things that you wanted to, or you were becoming the things that you said you weren't going to. But even more so, which is powerful to me, is that you knew what it was going to, like, you knew, as you said, you're going to have to break some things. You knew the challenge. And so why do you think it is that most people either, one, don't want to become aware, and number two, or aren't willing to go do the work it's going to take, as you did, to get where they want to go?
Well, I will tell you this, being ignorant to it all is a lot easier than self-awareness. And it's hard, because once you're aware, you can't be unaware, really. It's like, once you know it, and it's like, oh, then you're out of integrity. Once you are aware, and for the longest time, I didn't have a willingness to be aware. I was conditioned early on in my life to just power through, suck it up, do whatever it takes, you know, be the best. And when you're doing that, you are so unaware of everything and anyone. And that clearly that wasn't working. I mean, I had successes. I mean, I could crush any goal, but I was so unhappy inside. And, you know, then when I was watching my kids do that, I was like, this is not good for anyone. And so the willingness, I just really prayed for the willingness to be completely unapologetically aware. And holy moly, like, the awareness started to come in. And it's like, the reason people don't want to be aware, it's like this big, huge, glaring mirror looking at you, telling you all the things that, okay, this is on you, taking responsibility for this. Like, and that's hard. And why people might have awareness and then kind of like go backwards is because when we have this awareness that we have to make some changes, it's going to rock a boat, or two or three or four, whether it's your family, your career, your financial status, everything. And when I got to that point, I knew I was about to rock the biggest freaking ship I had ever been on.
Yeah.
But something had to change.
Yeah. So it's funny that, you know, as I sit here and listen, I think, and as funny is probably not the right word, right? It's you said it was about 7 years ago. For me, that was the big change for me too, is that 7 to 8 year time frame as well. But so is it at that time that you joined Isagenix? You said you're in the auto industry. Was it that time, or was it?
So right after my dad died, you know, I was still in the car industry, and I was really good at what I did, and top sales perform. I mean, I was good, and I hated it. And after my dad died, I tried to come back to my life and integrate back in as though nothing had happened. And I came back changed. And again, a new level of awareness, like, we get one life. We get one shot at this. And I knew that I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. I knew I needed an exit plan, but I had the golden handcuffs on. You know, like you said, I'm a single mom. I was the sole provider financially, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And so this is where a lot of people are today, is they know they have to make a change, but what do we do? And how do we do it without completely disassembling our entire life? And, you know, one of my coping mechanisms was drinking. You know, being in the car industry, it's kind of just par for the course. You know, if you can't beat them, join them. And there's a history of that in my family. My dad was a functioning alcoholic. And it got to the point where I was drinking to just completely numb out. And it was becoming a problem that was really affecting my kids. And so I made the decision one day. I walked into the boss's office and he was grooming me to run the place. He really, really was. And I walked in and I said, listen, I'm going to go pack up my desk and I am not coming back, because if I come back, it's just a matter of time before I die. So that day I took my income down to zero. That night I sat my two kids down. They were 14 and 15 at the time, and said, you know what? I need to get some help. And I'm going to come back and things will be different. I don't know how they're going to be different, but I do know why. And why is because of you. And I don't want you to carry the same burdens I have. I don't want you to follow my lead the way I've been leading you. And my son, who was 14, looked at me and said, Mom, I believe you. And I will give you up for 30 days or however long it was to have you the rest of our life. Wow. And so the next day I checked myself into a recovery center for alcohol, eating disorders, codependency, trauma, PTSD, all the things. And walked in not knowing what was going to happen. But I was committed to change everything at whatever cost. And that's what I did 7 years ago.
Tracy, so proud of you. I mean, so many people would, I think for many of us, we know someone who might be in a situation, but they just don't have that awareness or willing to make that change. And you just stepped in and said, "That's what I'm going to do." You took it head on. You looked it in the eyes and said, "I got to change it." And so, yeah.
And it was interesting because people would say to me, like, "You're not bad." I was very high functioning, just like my dad was. But, for me, my life was unmanageable in my terms because I was about to create another legacy of alcoholism and dysfunction. And I didn't want that. And it was not easy. It was not easy. And I had no career at this point. I didn't know what I was going to come home to when I got back, because I was still in a really toxic relationship that we lived together. But I went in just on blind faith that I was willing to do whatever it took, and that on the other side of this, there would be some explanation for why things were the way they were for so long. And that definitely happened.
Guys, if you're listening, we're in Connect, Share, Prosper, episode 72 with Tracy O'Malley, and she's sharing some really powerful personal things. And so I want to just ask you, Tracy, was it at this, it's like, I think there's people listening who think, okay, if where I'm at, whether I can relate exactly to your situation or not, but it's heavy for me, whatever it is for me. Right. And I have to at some point look in the mirror and say, I'm where I am because of the decisions I've made, which the positive is, if I want to change it, I can also create those things to change it. And so was it coming through that recovery place for you, that transition change, that now you had said, okay, if I can do this, I can help others as well? Because now that you do that, or was that sort of a slower evolution to say, hey, I want to go start helping others?
When I was a kid growing up in that environment, I remember at 9 and 10 years old, really wanting to understand why things were happening the way they were, and that they had to mean something. It had to matter for something. So, as a little girl, I remember really clearly that this would all be for something bigger. And it would take a couple decades, obviously, for me to kind of see that. But it wasn't like, I think a lot of people get into coaching or even network marketing or the health and wellness space or any of that to help people, right? And there is a codependency factor in that. Like, I want to help people so I can be well, right? And then that's where the imposter syndrome comes in, because then they're in it helping people and they're like, holy crap, I don't have my crap together. And then, they're like, people are going to find out that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so I was really, really careful. I had to kind of put my mask on first, oxygen mask on first, and really know that if I put anything in front of my own wellness first, I would lose it anyway, honestly. And so for 6 months, I didn't have a job, and that is the longest time I had not worked. I had babies and went back to work 2 weeks later. That's the kind of person I am. And so to take that 6 months was really hard, because my full-time job at that moment was to unlearn a lot of the things that I had learned, to take full responsibility. I grew up in that kind of home. I had sexual assaults on me, early on in my life. And all of those things I used as excuses to be just an asshole most of the time, to be really honest with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I said, I'm going to change, that means I had to take responsibility and say, well, I've chosen to believe things about myself that maybe aren't true. And that doesn't happen overnight. And I think sometimes, I get lots of people coming to me who have family members that are, in addiction or want to help people. And sometimes it's too soon. Like, you can help people just by a conversation and sharing your story. So I would talk in recovery centers and things like that the first 6 months. But I think people want to monetize helping people so fast that they don't work on their own stuff as much as maybe they need to. And I'm not knocking it. It's amazing to help people. But if you're caught in imposter syndrome, or, people pleasing, or, your value and worth is dependent on who you serve, then maybe you have some work to do. And so it was on the morning that I picked up my 6-month sober chip. And I started Isagenix just because physically I felt like a truck hit me. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was remnants of, just living a pretty toxic, stressful life for 40 years. And so I started Isagenix, and I didn't even know really it was a network marketing company until I Googled the company a few days after I started, and I felt so good. And I was like, oh no, this is not at all what I want to be a part of. But 6 months earlier, when my dad passed away, I remember being on the airplane, and I was so angry, and I was praying that I made it back in time to see him before he passed away. And I was angry, not because he was about to lose his life, because that was clearly out of my control, but I was so angry that I was in a job, in a career, that when he had called me 2 weeks earlier to say that he was really sick, I just couldn't get on an airplane that moment. And I knew I never wanted to be in that position again. And so, like, ugly crying, snot bubbles coming out my nose, praying for something different. And fast forward 6 months later, here I accidentally stumble into a network marketing company. And I'm like, that's not what I meant. I had just wiped out my entire social network. Every person that I'd ever been connected to, the boyfriend and I obviously didn't end up working out. My friends said I was no longer fun. Like, my entire social circle said, you are crazy. You're that single mom that went to rehab. So that's definitely a perfect time to start a network marketing business, right? Like,
yeah, right.
No. And so all my fears were like, who am I to do this? And I remembered that moment on the airplane. And, sometimes we have to be careful what we pray for, because most often it shows up in a package we don't want.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I was like, I'm not playing my own deck of cards. I'm just going to deal with the cards I've been dealt. And this is what's in front of me. And I know with what I've been doing the last 6 months, my emotional and spiritual wellness, that I could help people.
Yeah.
And so that's where that began. And it was pure love of service. Yes, I knew. I mean, I was running out of my savings like really fast. But I didn't worry about that. I knew that if I had the agenda to just love, serve, and care for people, that the rest would work itself out. And that's how my network marketing began, kind of on a fluke, with a box in my closet. Like, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly the poster child of health and wellness. Join my team.
So there's so much there I want to unpackage that you just said. Okay, so guys, we're listening to Tracy O'Malley, Connect, Share, Prosper, episode 72. If you have a question, make sure you type it in the notes here on Facebook, and I will ask Tracy that question. But I want to. There's two big things there that I want to talk about. I want to come back to the network. You talked about your network, and we'll come back to that. Mm-hmm. But first, I want to say this and tie this into business a little bit. Mm-hmm. You said something. I was trying to write it down exactly. You said the things that you believed of yourself that weren't true. And how I think that's very common, especially in the business world with people. They believe things, and other people say, "No, you're great," or "Why do you believe that?" But it's internal. So, what is it? These things that hold us back, and how do we remove that limiting belief in business so that we can be successful of the things that we can accomplish?
I wish I could say that people saying they believe in you and pouring all this love into you is the key. It helps for sure, but sometimes that actually makes us go down the shame lane even further because people are believing in us, yet we know what we believe about ourselves. And so it's like this Jekyll and Hyde thing going on in our head. And, I was very aware that my unworthiness belief and that I needed to be as close to perfect as possible in order to be accepted, loved, and have the attention that I so desired. And that was when I really was unpacking this. And again, the willingness to be so aware of where this comes from. I mean, if you have a backyard full of weeds, right? What most of us do is we get that big bottle of chemicals and spray the weeds because it's way easier, right? And just be done with them.
Yep.
Yet the first rain that comes, they come back bigger, stronger, harder, faster, and they multiply. And unfortunately, when we have these belief systems, what we do is slap a Band-Aid on them. We go to an event that's super empowering, and I'm not knocking it. It's amazing. It's better than not. Or we start doing affirmations or any of these things that are so positive. But if we don't pull up the belief at the root and figure out where that comes from, we like all that stuff that we are hiding about ourselves, that we believe about ourselves, it almost is like it comes back stronger because we're just slapping a Band-Aid on it when we really just need it as a tourniquet. And so what I did was, okay, where is this rooted from? When? Because we're born into this world, beautiful, sweet, innocent things. And when did life get a hold of us that all of a sudden Tracy thought, I need to be perfect in order to have love, approval, worthiness, and acceptance? And it took some digging. I mean, I was 40. Mm-hmm. So I had 4 decades to start and had you asked me before, I had no recollection of most of my childhood, most of it. Mm. And so really being willing to go to the painful places, because something pretty painful has to happen for you to believe that you actually aren't worthy of love or aren't worthy of success and abundance. It's a huge wound, right? And I was able to pinpoint at 4 years old where that first hit came from.
Wow.
And it was one sentence. It wasn't growing up in an alcoholic home necessarily. It wasn't having a sexual assault when I was 10. It was one sentence that I heard about the day I was born that changed everything. And
the sentence?
So my dad is amazing. He was amazing, but he had no filter. And for those of you over 40, if you remember All in the Family, Archie Bunker, my dad was pretty much that. And he was rough and tough, and he wanted a boy. My room was blue. The name was picked out for a boy. I knew every starting lineup of every Chicago team there was. I knew how to open a beer by the time I was 3. I was a little tom girl. And my dad was telling the story about the day I was born. And back then, the men weren't in the delivery room. And so the doctor came out after 30-something hours of my mom being in labor and said, "Congratulations, Mr. O'Malley, you have a daughter." And he said, "Keep her. I don't want her." And he was totally joking.
Right.
But here's the thing. And I had heard that story over and over and over. And even as a grown-up, when I hear it, if you knew my dad, you knew he was just joking. But you have to remember that a 4-year-old's ears heard that. Mm-hmm. And she wants to believe that her dad loves her unconditionally. And how I translated that is, oh my God, I'm never going to be a boy, so I need to be as perfect as possible in order for him to want me. And so from that moment forward, I was the people pleaser in the family. I was the make no waves. I was the I'm better seen than heard kind of girl. I would never speak up. But later in life, how that manifested, obviously, I'm going to blow my stack from time to time. So when I was feeling like I wasn't loved, appreciated, feeling worthy, the anger would come out. So that one sentence changed everything. And that's the thing, as adults, we intellectualize, of course my dad was joking.
Right.
But we have to go in, I had to go back in and heal that part of my heart that still carried that belief system.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so just the first step you can do is just be willing to go back and go to the hurtful places so that you can I could carry that forever. but where's my responsibility in that? And this is really hard for people when they've been hurt or wronged or, victimized. Like, I was sexually assaulted. That is not my fault. So how do I take responsibility for that? Right.
Right.
Or even my dad's. Our responsibility is that we bought into a belief that wasn't true about ourselves.
Right.
I bought into the belief that I wasn't worthy, that I needed to be perfect. And that's on me as an adult. And my dad did the best he could with what he had. I have done the best that I can with what I had. And today that stops now. And really just honor that little girl. I keep a picture of my 4-year-old self right in front of me. She's looking right at me. She's on my phone. And whenever I want to go to those places where I think I need to be this perfect leader, person, friend, mother, I remember that there's a little girl that needs more love and compassion. And I just love her. And immediately I don't feel like I have to show up as anything but myself.
So interesting. First of all, thank you for sharing that. It's so powerful and so interesting. In my experience, the number of people I've spoken with or in coaching, consulting, training, will come up even sometimes privately afterwards. And we discover through the conversation, or they become self-aware that somehow the success they're trying to prove in business somehow is to validate what someone else said they couldn't do, or to prove to someone else, right? Or to be worthy of love by basically achieving something. It's interesting. I had this conversation just yesterday, just briefly, leaving church with my family. So I have 5 children. And I was just saying that, as I push my kids really hard, at the same time, there becomes this balance that I don't want them to have to feel like they have to earn the love, right? It's just because I'm pushing them hard is different than that I still love them no matter what, right? And that's that balance. And so I think in business often, guys, you're listening to this, I think often we need to just somehow have that awareness, as Tracy's described so well, to say, if I'm doing this to prove or try to validate someone else, that's a path that never gets fulfilled. And you have to do it for yourself, which again, we're always taught that's selfish, but it's not. You have to take care of yourself. You heard Tracy talk about how she had to take care of herself. I loved that. I want to now unpack the second thing you talked about, because I thought this was really, really powerful. And that is that you had to start over. You had to build your whole circle again. We talk about, the phrases everyone hears about, the 5 people in your circle, you're that sum total. You had to erase the whole circle almost and start over.
Yeah,
so
I literally
I
took it to ground freaking zero.
Yeah.
And most people aren't willing to do that, which I get. It comes with its challenges, to say the least. It comes with anger. It comes with resistance. It comes with uncertainty and fear, all the things. But like, they're not kidding. The 5 people you spend the most time, and honestly, it should be the 10, because I think, in the world we live in today, and this counts on social media too. Like, if you are entertained by things that don't serve you, that's kind of bleeding into your belief system. Right. You have to kind of mute out a lot. And, when I knew that I couldn't, environment is stronger than willpower. And I probably have more willpower than anybody I know. I mean, I was a high achiever. I could crush it, which again, like you just so beautifully said, I was trying to prove something. But when I knew that in order to do this the right way, I was going to have to clean house. And my closest friend of 10 years, the love of my life, a lot of my family had to be put on the back burner for quite some time till I could really heal and be in an environment where I'm not affected by it. And sometimes you need to take a little sabbatical. And so it was lonely. And that's why a lot of people won't do it, because it is lonely. It is scary. And all I had were my kids and 1 or 2 friends left. That was it.
Right.
And, when network marketing came along, I was like, how am I going to do this? I know leverage. I know how to build relationships. That's why I was so good at what I did. A lot of it was me manipulating in order to have a relationship in the past, obviously, because I was trying to prove my worth.
Sure.
But to build relationships on a solid foundation that was driven by just genuinely caring about human beings. I wanted to know everybody's story, because clearly what the story I was showing people wasn't the truth. And I knew I wasn't alone in that. And a lot of the time I spent in, recovery centers and things like that, we all have similar patterns. We're all filled with, unworthiness and not believing in ourselves, or we're emotionally detached. Like, this is a common theme, but I wanted to know the stories. And so, I'm more introverted by nature, but I knew that I needed a new playground and new playmates. And so one by one, I just started showing up. But more importantly, I just started showing up mask free and saying, this is who I am. Yeah, I'm that single mom that went to rehab. And you know what? I've never felt more free in my life, even though I'm broke as a joke. I have no friends, but I can live just as who I was meant to be, and we'll see where this goes. And that's kind of how it started.
So you showed up authentically, and no false, like you said, the imposter syndrome. And because of that, I believe that's probably what then attracted the people to you that needed to be in your life, because that was removed out of the way. And now they could come in and see you for who you were, as authentic, genuine relationships.
Yeah. When I had to take an honest look again, that responsibility of who was in my life, they were all really good people. None of them were bad. However, I attracted these people into my life at a time where I was not very healthy, and I was an ass, and I was cocky and arrogant and taking no responsibility. I was the blamer. And ironically, who was in my life? People that do the same thing. So if you've got people around you, you need to flip the mirror around and say, okay, what about me is attracting this in? And if I wanted to attract who I was today, I had to make room for them, for the beautiful people to come in that were living authentically. But that meant I had to show up as that. You have to go first. And I went first, and nobody showed up for a little while. I was like, wow, okay, but I wasn't going to stop doing that, because I know what going back to what I used to be would bring in, and I don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, at first it was slow, and then all of a sudden it was an avalanche of beautiful people, one by one. I can't even tell you what my network looks like today. It's fantastic. But
you've been intentional about working it. And guys, if you're listening to this, I think that's the key, is that be intentional about changing it and always improving and building upon it. We're listening to Tracy O'Malley on Connect, Share, Prosper. If they want to follow you, go to your website, tracyo'malley.com, Instagram, Facebook. Where should they follow you?
I'm here on Facebook. If you're watching me, I shared it on my page too. So hi. Also Instagram, Tracy_O'Malley, and obviously my website. And something you just said was so powerful. And I really want to be clear about what that means, intentional about building a network. And, because we've been talking business, I didn't have an agenda in that. I just wanted to build relationships. I wasn't like pouncing and like, join my team. Blah, blah, blah. It was like genuine interest in people. Yeah. I wanted, you've heard it, be more interested than interesting. And the rest will fall into place, because if people trust that you don't have an agenda, they're more likely to join you, and it'll be a lot easier. And so I was intentional about building relationships, but no agenda as far as what that would mean. I was going to kind of let whatever happened in that relationship run its course. And some were all in with me. Some were like, I'm going to be cheering you on. Some became some of my closest friends. But you're 100% right. Being intentional about genuinely caring about people is the best networking tip you could ever do, without an agenda of money making or team building. That will come. That will absolutely come, and you will absolutely attract somebody like me. Like, if you're kind of going in with agenda, you're going to attract people that always have an agenda. So
true. I mean, I say all the time, be relational, not transactional. If you're transactional, you might win the game, right? But relational, you'll have a career for sure. And listen, all of you are just that one relationship away from changing your future. And you could bump into a Tracy O'Malley or someone like me, and anybody that where you go, wow, that one person, if I was open to it and intentional about it, could change everything for me in my future. But you have to be able to remove the imposter syndrome. That I loved, by the way. We had several comments on that. I'm going to ask you one last question on this. And so guys, if you have a question, make sure you put it in here. People are loving the comments. I think they're so enthralled in the story. They haven't had a question. That's okay. But I want to ask you this. This is like, and we may have already answered this. However, I'll give you another time to think about it. I ask every guest this. This is that time to, maybe in business, we often don't. We're careful not to pound our chest and be like, look at what I did, look at what I did. But I also like to have this venue as a place where you can say, okay, hey, this is something I accomplished in business that I'm super proud of. That one thing that you could say, this is what I've done. I accomplished this. What would that one thing be that you've done that you said, boy, I really put my heart into that. I really went after this goal and I achieved it. Can you think of one thing that you did that you've accomplished that you set out to do?
You're right. I'm probably the worst self-promoter of all time. I will say that.
Okay, that's okay.
However, I know how important it is to really honor the process and the journey. And my greatest accomplishment, hands down, and absolutely this plays into how I show up in business. And, I was always able to be successful on paper and all the things, but to look at my kids today who are 21 and 22 and know that I have broken every pattern that I grew up with them. They don't carry the burdens that I do. When you talked about your 5 kids earlier, like I got choked up because they are little ears, and, really going back with my own kids and healing the things that hurt them early on that, I was just doing the best I can. Right. And they have the confidence to know that they can be, do, and have truly anything they want without having to perform for my love or approval or the world's love and approval. And to watch these amazing millennials go out and just show up authentically in a world where that's hard to do at their age.
Yeah.
And how that's, my daughter is a business owner. My son will probably be a pastor. He's a youth leader in the community. And none of that would have been possible if I didn't go first in our home and say, this crap stops here with me going first. And again, I don't know how, but I do know why. And hands down, the millions that I've made, great. The freedom and choices I have, incredible. A few months ago, my greatest protector in my life, who was my uncle, passed away after a 7-month cancer diagnosis. And this time around, when I got the call that he was sick, I was able to be exactly where I wanted to be with him. And the freedom of that financial wall that I've built, the network of 90,000 people that I now have 7 years later, from 0 to 90,000, wow. 7 years later, allowed me to be exactly where I wanted to be, which is at his bedside, holding his hand as he left the earth. That to me, if I didn't do all that loving and serving and caring for people, I couldn't be there with him. I couldn't be what I am for my kids. And so if you're out there watching and you've got this stuff going on, I beg of you to really be willing to go back to the places that you've been hurt and heal it properly so you can live the most optimal, beautiful life that you were designed to begin with.
Woo, so good. So first of all, I think you should be very proud of that. I think it's an amazing thing, the legacy that you're leaving, the fact that you changed the path, and now because you are blazing that trail, generations can follow down that trail. And so guys, if you're listening to this, Tracy's a great example of the things we've just talked about, of how to do that. And to make those changes that need to be made, like to put in the work that it takes to go do that. There's an interesting thing that you said, and I thought it was such a great bookend to what we've talked about, right? The way that story evolved to what you're able to do now. Guys, if you're listening to this, so often we think about, well, it's selfish of me to take care of myself. But the reality is, if she had not taken care of herself and done the work required to take care of herself, she couldn't be in a position to take care and help of others. And so you can't give from an empty purse. You can't give from an empty cup. You have to be able to fill yours first and be able to do it through giving to others and serving others. And what a great example and a great story you are, Tracy. So honored to have you on Connect, Share, Prosper today. Thank you so much for being on this. Guys, make sure you follow Tracy, connect with her on social media. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to, for those of you who are live on Facebook, stay with me here. There was a question that came in, and so we're going to ask that question. The recording piece will stop. So this is why you get to be here live, because you get to hear the questions. So thank you for joining this episode of Connect, Share, Prosper.